Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise and get straight to the fascinating insights hidden within stacks of information. Today, we're embarking on a journey into a truly enigmatic subject, Freemasonry. Our mission for you is to uncover its quest for immortality and the incredibly turbulent world that shaped its very foundations.
Indeed. And our deep dive today is guided mainly by Christopher Earnshaw's extensive work, Freemasonry, Quest for Immortality. It's a really rich exploration, weaving together 17th and 18th century social history, alchemy, the Enlightenment. What's so fascinating here, I think, is how it reveals Freemasonry not just as, a system of morality, but potentially as a path to understanding life, death, what lies beyond, and all emerging from this truly chaotic period.
Okay, let's unpack this then. We're going to explore how the chaos of Stuart England, we're talking wars, plagues, massive societal shifts, how all that prepared the ground for a revolutionary new kind of fraternity, one that grappled with these ultimate questions in some surprising ways. You'll discover the hidden meanings, maybe, in their rituals, the philosophical debates rocking the era, and even a few startling facts that might just change how you see history itself. So to really understand Freemasonry's revival in 1717, we first need to step back into the world that birthed it, the 17th and early 18th centuries in England. Well, putting it mildly, they were a bit of a mess. Think political intrigue, religious strife, literal fires and plagues.
Absolutely. A mess is probably accurate. The backdrop was just constant upheaval. You have the English Reformation, the dissolution of monasteries, which completely shattered traditional power structures, and then this whole succession of Stuart monarchs, starting with James I, who united Scotland and England, but then faced numerous Catholic plots, like the famous Gunpowder Plot in 1605.
Right, the Gunpowder Plot. That always stands out as such a, dramatic moment. The whole, remember the 5th of November, Guy Fawkes. How did the sheer audacity of schemes like that, trying to blow up Parliament and kidnap the princess, how did that constant threat shape the public's mindset? Did it push people towards alternative groups?
That's a really great point. The scale of that political and religious turmoil, exemplified by plots like the Gunpowder Plot.
Yeah.
It definitely cultivated a deep distrust in established institutions. People were looking for something else. And this distrust, I think it's a key insight into why a new kind of secretive fraternity emphasizing moral character, not just lineage, became so appealing. People wanted stability, meaning outside the usual power structures. And the chaos just continued, of course. James I's son, Charles I, was later executed for treason. Then you have Cromwell's interregnum. Just unprecedented instability, fertile ground for new social ideas.
And like you said, it wasn't just politics and religion. Nature itself seemed almost, actively hostile. We had the Great Plague of London in 1665, killing 1 in 5 people in the city, just horrifying accounts from people like Pepys, the red crosses on doors, the carts. Bring out your dead. Then, bam, the Great Fire of London in 1666 destroys most of the old city. St. Paul's Cathedral melts. People must have genuinely thought Armageddon was here.
They really did, and you can absolutely see why. These calamities, plague, fire, and let's not forget the Great Storm of 1703, which caused immense flooding. They didn't just devastate England physically. They eroded trust in the old explanations for suffering. They pushed people to seek new frameworks, new ways of understanding existence. In a world where even the king, James I, still believed witches conjured storms and wrote his book Demonology about it. How did a shift towards, scientific reasoning even begin to take hold amidst all that fear?
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? You've got James I backing witch trials, and then almost simultaneously figures like William Harvey, famous for discovering blood circulation, stepping in. I read he actually dissected the supposed familiar of an accused witch, just a frog, and basically said, nope, nothing supernatural here, based purely on observation. What was it about Harvey's approach that started chipping away at superstition?
Well, Harvey's skepticism, it was rooted in empirical observation, looking at the evidence. It marked this growing English preoccupation with natural philosophy over just accepting superstition. It reflected a burgeoning intellectual movement. But it was a slow burn, definitely. I mean, you had theologians like John Wesley arguing as late as 1768 that giving up belief in witchcraft was effectively giving up the Bible. So the tension was absolutely palpable.
And against this backdrop, fear, despair, questioning, traditional society itself was fraying. You mentioned the gin craze earlier. That fueled this sort of social collapse and moral outrage in London, didn't it? William III encouraged gin production for economic reasons, but it just exploded. Hogarth's Gin Lane paints a pretty grim picture.
Exactly. Gin was cheaper than beer or wine, totally unregulated for a while, and it became this huge social problem, especially among the poor. It was even seen as a sort of woman's drink, adding another layer of moral panic. this breakdown of public order, the perceived moral decay. It made the structured, ethical framework offered by something like Freemasonry, with its focus on self-improvement and a higher purpose, seem incredibly compelling. And amidst all this chaos, you see the rise of free thinkers like John Locke. He was insisting that truth must be based on logic and reason, challenging church dogma. Locke's empiricism, his ideas about consciousness, individual liberty, they were hugely influential. This whole intellectual environment, questioning old beliefs, science, offering new explanations, that was the fertile ground for speculative Freemasonry to really emerge.
So, okay, into this turbulent, superstitious, yet increasingly scientific world, Freemasonry has its revival in 1717. But you're saying, and the sources suggest, this wasn't just about creating a moral code or a social club. The first Grandmasters had something deeper in mind.
That's a powerful observation, yes. Maggie, who's a really prominent Masonic scholar, is quoted saying Freemasonry was never intended to be just moral education. He called it a fraternity or brotherhood of men, of which the grand idea is work, which is key. It makes you ask, what work exactly were these speculative Masons actually engaged in? And what's fascinating here is the answer seems to tie directly into one of the biggest theological debates of that whole era, immortality.
The great immortality debate.
Yeah.
Because during this period, the idea of an inherently immortal soul wasn't universally accepted, even among Christians. You had the traditional Catholic beliefs in purgatory, sure. But then Protestant reformers like Martin Luther, they challenged the idea that the human soul was naturally immortal. Luther even called papal declarations on it endless monstrosities. This led to things like Christian mortalism ideas, like soul sleep, where the soul just rests until the final resurrection, or even annihilationism, the idea the unsaved just cease to exist instead of eternal torment.
Precisely. And the new accessibility of Scripture, thanks to English translations by figures like Wycliffe and later William Tyndale, really fueled these different interpretations. Suddenly, people could read it for themselves. You had figures like Richard Overton writing pamphlets outright denying inherent immortality, and William Coward writing his book Second Thoughts concerning human soul, which Parliament actually found so blasphemous they had it burned by the public hangman. So this raises a really important question. Why did the early Grandmasters, in a time when these fundamental beliefs about life after death were so fractured and uncertain, feel it was necessary to specifically teach about immortality within Freemasonry? Our sources suggest they weren't just repeating church dogma. They were attempting something different, trying to prove immortality from a standpoint of, well, scientific knowledge and reason, rather than just blind faith. The Bible itself, you see, offered surprisingly little clear guidance on the specifics, creating this kind of void.
That's a really compelling insight. So they weren't just accepting faith, they were trying to demonstrate it somehow. How did they aim to prove this spiritual immortality? The sources point to this blend of ancient wisdom, esoteric practices, almost like spiritual alchemy. You mentioned it even connected the lodge layout to the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. That sounds incredibly deep. Can you expand on that connection?
Certainly. Yeah, Freemasonry seems to have integrated these quite complex esoteric concepts, like the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. It's this ancient Jewish mystical system. Imagine as 10 interconnected spheres, the Sephiroth, representing divine attributes, or maybe stages of spiritual growth. And the idea is that this structure is actually mapped onto the lodge floor plan. Crucially, the Hiramic tragedy, which is a core Masonic allegory or ritual drama, seems to align with specific Sephiroth. It symbolizes stages of spiritual death and rebirth. So, for example, the Sephira Gevura, often linked with severity or judgment, relates to the slaying of the Grandmaster figure, Hiram Abiff. Then Da'at, which represents knowledge but also a kind of hidden void or abyss, signifies the concealment of his body like a symbolic dark night of the soul. And Yesod, the foundation, connects both to hiding the evidence and then later the symbolic raising of the Grand Master, representing resurrection into a higher state of consciousness. These aren't just abstract ideas. They seem built into the very geometry and drama of the lodge experience.
Wow, that really does give a whole new depth to the ritual. So the ritual itself, especially the third degree, it's speaking to this alchemical process, awakening a spiritual spark, purification, and then the symbolic resurrection, a rebirth into a higher consciousness, not a physical one. And I understand symbols are absolutely key here. Things like the Tau cross and the sprig of acacia.
That's a great summary, yes. The ritual is very much a symbolic journey. The Tau cross, for instance, which can be formed by the position of the feet during parts of the ritual, it symbolizes ancient wisdom, immortality. It connects to this sense of enduring truth within Freemasonry. And the sprig of acacia, that's a very ancient emblem of immortality. Its wood is durable, it's evergreen. It perfectly symbolizes the incorruptible nature of the soul, the idea of life persisting through apparent death. Even modern symbols, like the forget-me-not flower, adopted by some Masons to remember those who died under Nazi persecution. It links to this idea of the immortality of memory, of legacy. And this all seems to connect interestingly to Francis Bacon's vision of Solomon's house in his work New Atlantis. He envisioned this ideal scientific research establishment. The parallels with speculative Freemasonry are quite striking. The three masters, the merchants of light seeking knowledge, the concept of a brotherhood of man. It suggests maybe a shared aspiration for a kind of experimental spiritual alchemy aimed at refining the human spirit.
Okay, given all this deep symbolic and philosophical underpinning, it's maybe no surprise that the nature of Freemasonry's secrets has been a source of endless speculation, which leads us to some pretty controversial views, like those of Albert Pike, a very famous 19th century Masonic scholar. He suggested the blue degrees, the first three basic degrees, might intentionally mislead the initiate. He famously called Blue Lodge Masonry a sphinx buried to the head in the sands. What exactly did he mean by that? Was he saying it's all a trick?
Well, Pike's views are definitely provocative. He did suggest that the true explication of the rituals is reserved for adepts, for those who go much further. He wrote quite bluntly, "It is not intended that he, the initiate, shall understand them, but it is intended that he shall imagine he understands them." He even suggested very controversially that the most essential portion of the third degree has been wholly cut away. Now, this perspective emerged when ritual itself was evolving. It used to be taught just by emulation, person to person, and later became more standardized through printed books. So it raises this important question. Is there truly some hidden meaning deliberately obscured? Or is it more about achieving a deeper personal understanding through study and reflection? Our sources, like Earnshaw's work, suggest that while Pike's remarks are certainly fuel for conspiracy theorists, if you analyze the ritual itself carefully, you find profound meaning there, not necessarily deception. The emphasis seems to be squarely on personal transformation, building that spiritual temple within your own heart, living as living stones, eternal in the heavens, as the ritual says. The teachings are there, perhaps veiled in symbolism, but accessible through effort.
Right. So what does this all mean for Freemasonry today, then? And for us as learners trying to understand it, it seems clear the early Grandmasters intended this deep intellectual and spiritual journey. But how well is that original intention being carried forward in the modern world? Are lodges still focused on that quest?
That is a critical question, and one being asked within the craft itself. The sources definitely highlight concerns about education and even member retention. Many Masons today are actively asking for more Masonic education. They joined, seeking knowledge, seeking that deeper understanding we've been talking about. So the suggestion is that lodges perhaps need to re-emphasize that quest aspect more strongly. Make education a regular item on their agenda, their trestle board as they call it. Preserve that sense of wonder and mystique. This could involve practical changes too, like maybe using candles instead of electric lights sometimes, or reintroducing the chamber of reflection, a contemplative space used before initiation in many European lodges to foster a more introspective atmosphere. There's certainly a perceived need for ongoing education on the ritual itself, on the bylaws, the history, and yes, even on how to address the common conspiracy theories, just to make sure that original depth isn't lost over time.
It's really fascinating when you think about it, how the very structure and values of Freemasonry, aiming for this sort of ideal society based on generosity, enlightenment, brotherhood, almost like Bacon's Solomon's house you mentioned, were forged in the crucible of such intense historical fires. It definitely puts a new spin on the public image, maybe the dark suits and white gloves, which, by the way, I understand are worn partly in mourning for Hiram Abiff, the allegorical architect, and the gloves symbolize sanctity or purity of action. And it also highlights the importance of their long-standing rule. No political or religious arguments allowed in lodge. And the injunction for Masons to respect the law of the land wherever they reside, a kind of sanctuary from the outside chaos.
It does seem that way, yes. And the ongoing challenge for Freemasonry today is precisely that. How do you maintain this profound esoteric tradition, the hidden mysteries, the spiritual alchemy, while still being open, welcoming new members, and staying relevant in a very different modern world? It really calls for critical thinking, for questioning the ritual not dismissively, but to understand it deeper. Pursuing what Kepler, the astronomer, called the wonderful jewel, which Earnshaw connects to the secret key of Freemasonry itself, potentially found in profound mathematical principles like the Kepler triangle, Pythagoras' theorem, even the golden ratio. Ultimately, it points towards a personal search for truth. As the biblical quote sometimes used in Masonic context says, "Ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free."
What a deep dive indeed. From the sheer chaos of Stuart England, the wars, the plagues, the fires, right through to the subtle symbolism of the Tree of Life on the lodge floor, and its profound philosophical quest for immortality. We've definitely seen that Freemasonry's origins are far richer, far more complex than often meets the eye. It's really a reminder that even in the most tumultuous, frightening times, humanity seeks meaning, knowledge, and that deeper connection to the universe.
It truly is. The journey through these sources, especially Earnshaw's work, reveals that underlying current within early Freemasonry was this profound grappling with fundamental human questions. It aimed to provide a framework for spiritual growth, a unique perspective on life's ultimate destination. It really highlights that enduring human desire, not just for knowledge, but for understanding purpose, and maybe that timeless quest for self-perfection.
So, as you go about your day, maybe something to consider. In what quest are you truly engaged right now? What kind of spiritual temple, metaphorically speaking, are you building within yourself? And what secrets or perhaps hidden truths are you maybe yet to uncover in your own journey? Now, please, some food for thought, wouldn't you say?